Yes, the big news that we're currently tracking. Karnataka High Court all set to pronounce the hijab verdict shortly from now. This is going to be a debate on right to religion versus campus discipline. Let's hope this is time for closure now after this month-long campus stir. Remember, we saw violent protests turning out in many districts of Karnataka as several saffron-clad boys came right outside college, saying that if hijab is allowed inside educational institutions, then they too must be allowed to wear saffron shawls. This debate raged on, with the High Court taking up the matter from a single-judge bench, went to a three-judge bench, and now finally the verdict is due to be pronounced in just moments from now. 10:30 is the time that the court has given. In a little while, we'll know exactly what the verdict would say, whether it would allow hijab inside educational institutions or not, whether this is an essential religious practice or not. These are points that will now finally be cleared by the Karnataka High Court's verdict. Here are visuals on the left-hand side as police deployment now in place ahead of the Karnataka High Court's verdict. The police security teams, they're being sensitized. They're being spoken to ensure that they maintain law and order effectively. Let's hear it.
ನಮ್ಮ ಪೊಲೀಸ್ ಅಧಿಕಾರಿ ಮತ್ತು ಸಿಬ್ಬಂದಿಗಳ ಕರ್ತವ್ಯ ಇದೆ. ಸೂಕ್ಷ್ಮ ಪ್ರದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ನಿಯೋಜನೆ ಮಾಡಿರ್ತೀವಿ. ನಾವು ಯಾವುದೇ ಕಾರಣಕ್ಕೂ ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿಗಳ ಜೊತೆ, ಶಿಕ್ಷಕರ ಜೊತೆ, ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿ ಪರ ಯಾರಾದರೂ ಪೋಷಕರಾಗಲಿ ಅಥವಾ ಸಂಘಟನೆಗಳಾಗಲಿ, ರಾಜಕೀಯ ಪಕ್ಷದವರಾಗಲಿ ಬಂದರೆ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ ತೀರ್ಪನ್ನು ತಿಳಿ ಹೇಳುವಂಥದ್ದು, ಅದನ್ನು ಅಂಡರ್ಸ್ಟ್ಯಾಂಡ್ ಮಾಡಿಸುವಂಥದ್ದು, ಆ ಒಂದು ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡುತ್ತಾರೆ. ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಶಿಕ್ಷಣ ಇಲಾಖೆ ಇದೆ ಮತ್ತು ಎಲ್ಲೆಲ್ಲಿ ಅವಶ್ಯಕತೆ ಬೀಳುತ್ತೆ ಜಿಲ್ಲಾಧಿಕಾರಿಗಳು ವಿಶೇಷ ಅಧಿಕಾರಿಗಳನ್ನು ಕಳಿಸ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ತಿಳಿ ಹೇಳಿಸುವಂಥ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ.
There you have it. The police there sensitizing the police team. A large deployment has now been placed across several volatile districts of Karnataka, including Shimoga, Udupi, Mangalore, Kundapura area. Pramod Madhav is in fact in Shimoga. Pramod, over to you. We see the police now being sensitized. Early this morning, police deployment has been effectively deployed. In fact, the police commissioner, Kamal Pant itself, has said that no protests will be allowed anywhere in the state of Karnataka. Section 144 has been imposed in several districts and police deployment in large scale. We see that police are being sensitized. Do you see a similar situation on ground in that very tense district of Shimoga?
For now, everything seems to be normal over here, and we are trying to track Minister Ishwarappa, who actually ended up in a controversy last time over the saffron flag, his comment, and currently he's also chairing a meeting about the Prime Minister's visit to Shimoga as well. So he's at Shimoga currently, and just like you mentioned, for now, the situation seems very normal. People are commuting, and just like you mentioned, this turned into a huge issue during the hearing as well because of the Basandal activists' murder, but currently law and order situation is being maintained well, and everyone, just like you mentioned, are waiting for the verdict also. So we are trying to catch Ishwarappa to find out what he did, once the verdict comes over, what will be his comments on this matter.
Right. You know, Pramod, several institutions in Shimoga have already issued a blanket ban on hijab or any other religious symbol for that matter. We saw large-scale protests by students itself who came up right at the doorstep of their education institutions, created this really tense and volatile atmosphere. Is there any hard direction and a strict order that's been put in place? You showed us visuals of this banner right outside a college that said there is no debate on this until the Karnataka verdict is out. Would you see that in other educational institutions too?
Well, we were able to see a couple of those banners in certain institutions, especially at DVS Circle in Shimoga, and the banner very clearly mentioned that particular interim orders copy as well. But in fact, we did not see any kind of students coming together, any kind of meeting or protests so far on this matter. It looks like everybody is waiting for the verdict, and also we are also trying to find out exactly if any students are coming together at any point. But for now, it seems like Shimoga is quite normal, and the important aspect that within 5 minutes we are going to get the verdict about the wearing hijab, and for that only everyone is waiting here.
All right, Pramod, do stay with us. We're, of course, tracking very closely the developments coming in from different parts of Karnataka, even as the High Court's verdict is all set to be pronounced in moments from now. India Today's largest team of reporters are on ground. Nolan Pinto is in Udupi. He's bringing us all those sensitive details. I'm going to patch him in just moments from now. But in the meanwhile, you see visuals of police deployment extensively along the length and breadth of several of these volatile districts of Karnataka. You have police that have been heavily deployed to avoid any kind of untoward situation. Remember, we saw large-scale protests that erupted right after the Karnataka government issued a fresh order that says no hijab or saffron shawl or any religious symbol will be allowed inside classrooms. CDS guidelines must be followed. CDC guidelines had very strictly prescribed uniformity, which meant no religious symbols, including the hijab, would be allowed in those colleges. And right after that, we saw the protests that carried out. Visuals of those protests previously are on your screens here that really escalated to a point. We saw clashes between communities, students from different communities, students coming from the same college, the same schools, pitted against each other, only to push their religious symbol inside classrooms. This was awful, a situation that unfolded to see this kind of polarization happening at religious institutions across several volatile regions in Karnataka, mostly the coastal belt. And the visuals that you see here is compelling enough to say that this is a very keenly watched verdict. In fact, the verdict will be out in just moments from now. This will really pave the way, almost a landmark verdict that it will be. In case a situation like this arises in the future, this will surely be a verdict that will be looked into very closely. Even as we speak, the Karnataka High Court has now just taken up the matter. They are reading out the hijab verdict. In fact, the High Court, they're saying that we have questions after holistic view. Remember, a three-judge panel had very keenly heard the entire argument coming in from the Karnataka government as well as those petitioners in detail. For at least 2 weeks, the hearing went on where arguments were heard. This was entirely a debate on the right to religion versus campus discipline. In fact, this was the debate that went on for 2 weeks now, and now the High Court saying that we have questions after holistic view. The Karnataka High Court now just taken up the hearing, the verdict. In fact, they are going to be pronouncing the verdict in just moments from now. But here's the question number one. Here, the Karnataka High Court there, while it reads out the verdict, the court asking, is hijab an essential part of Islam? Here's the court saying that we have questions after holistic view. And question number one, which the High Court asks here, is hijab an essential practice in Islam? And then you have questions coming in from the High Court where the court asks, is uniformity, in fact, let me revisit the first question. If hijab is essential part of Islam, this is a question that's being asked by court. Is uniform okay as per rights? Now, this is the High Court now, as it reads the verdict, is coming out with some of those questions that they are, of course, trying to contemplate some answers to. Here is the Karnataka High Court that really heard the case for close to 2 weeks. It is a very complex case, undoubtedly. Question number one, which the Karnataka High Court asks, is hijab an essential part of Islam? Is it an essential practice? This is the debate that has boiled down to whether hijab is an essential practice in Islam or not. And these are questions which the High Court is asking even before it pronounced its verdict. Was the government Feb 5th order, in fact, let me revisit that question here. We're looking at the hijab verdict that is going to be pronounced in just moments from now. But here are the questions that the court is asking even before the verdict is out. Nolan Pinto is joining us. He's tracking the court's developments there. Nolan, please give us an insight into these questions that the High Court is asking currently on hijab being an essential practice or not. These are just questions that are being announced while the court readies to give out its verdict in just moments from now. These are really important questions where the debate really boiled down to whether or not hijab is an essential practice in Islam or not. Many of those petitioners insisted that this is an essential practice, while the state government of Karnataka denied this is an essential practice. Now you have the court there all set to pronounce its verdict. Please take us through what the court is hearing.
Well, in fact, Nabila, the before everything started, the High Court stated that they are taking a holistic view of the entire matter and hence have formulated a few questions and have answered them accordingly. I'm going to go one by one.
You have the High Court that just says that hijab is not an essential practice of Islam. Could you elaborate a little bit? With the High Court now saying that hijab is not an essential practice in Islam. This is precisely what we hear the court has said. Please elaborate.
Well, in fact, Nabila, it will be difficult to actually elaborate on that at the moment because this is what they have been focusing on. There are four important questions, and then I think we'll be able to actually understand what they are trying to say. First question is whether hijab is an essential part of the Islamic faith protected under Article 25. Second one is whether prescription of school uniform is violative of rights. The third question is whether the government order of February 5, apart from being incompetent and manifest arbitrary, violates Article 14 and 15. Now, in fact, the High Court has answered all of them. To the first question, whether hijab is an essential part of Islam, it says does not form part of essential religious practice. On the second question was whether...
Right, stay with us, Nolan. I'm going to quickly go close to Anisha Mathur. She's been tracking the court developments. Anisha, the Karnataka High Court says hijab is not an essential practice in Islam and also says that students cannot object to uniformity. Elaborate to us what exactly the court is reading out.
Well, the court has just read out the operative part of its order. The Chief Justice bench has said that they formulated 4 specific questions: whether wearing of hijab is part of religious practice, whether prescription of school uniform is a violation of fundamental rights, whether the government order of February in which they had said that we have prescribed the uniform under consideration of public order, whether that order is correct or not, and whether there could be any disciplinary inquiry against the officials who were implementing this entire situation. The court has answered in a negative to all of them. Remember, the court has said that hijab is not an essential practice, that uniform is a part of the authority of the schools, that the students cannot object to uniform being prescribed. In addition, they have also said that there is no call for the court's interference or disciplinary proceedings against the officials of the school, and that the students will have to follow the uniform that has been prescribed by the school and colleges. This is a very, very big development, but this is the only a small part of the verdict has been read out in the open court. We'll have to wait and see the entire judgment, whether what other observations have been made. But for now, it is very clear that the court has said students cannot object to uniform and that hijab is not a part of essential practice of religion.
Right, Anisha, this is a massive development coming in from court as the Karnataka High Court pronounces its verdict. It upholds the Karnataka government's order for uniformity. 5th of Feb, a fresh order was given out by the Karnataka government that said that uniformity must be maintained, no religious symbols must be allowed inside educational institutions. It seemed like the Karnataka High Court has upheld the Karnataka government's fresh Feb 5th order and now says that hijab is not an essential practice in Islam. This is almost worded by the Karnataka High Court as it pronounced its verdict. What more has the High Court said while observing this matter? It says that hijab is not an essential part of Islam and also says that students cannot object to uniformity. Anisha, we saw large deliberations and debate on what is uniformity. Many of those petitioners saying there in court that they are not objecting to uniforms. They only want to add a piece of cloth over that uniform which coordinates with the color of their uniform. But here the court very clearly saying that students cannot object to uniformity, which almost means that the CDC guidelines framing a definition around uniformity, which means no hijab, no saffron shawl or no religious symbols will be allowed, is what is ideally being upheld by court entirely.
Well, yes, Nabila, the court has very clearly said, and I'm quoting this here, prescription of school uniform is a reasonable restriction and therefore students cannot object to the uniform. So when the court is saying this very, very clearly, that the prescription of your uniform is a reasonable restriction, it is recognizing that the students have raised the argument that their fundamental rights being affected, but the court saying that the state under reasonable restrictions can make this kind of a uniform, that the colleges, the government college did have the right to prescribe a uniform, and no religious, if the college is saying that no religious symbol can be worn to the school or college, then the students cannot object to do so. So very clearly the court come down in favor of the government of Karnataka and the colleges that were prescribing the kind of reform.
Right.
But as I said, we'll have to wait.
It almost instills faith in the CDC guidelines and the government's vision when it comes to uniformity. The government's definition when it comes to uniformity is now entirely being upheld by the Karnataka High Court. A massive setback for all those pro-hijab petitioners who hoped that they would be allowed inside classrooms with the hijab. Now this Karnataka High Court leaves them looking for options legally. We're looking at the Karnataka High Court now observing that hijab is not an essential part of Islam. This is a massive verdict that's been pronounced by the Karnataka High Court. In fact, that's just the beginning of their verdict being pronounced. There's a lot more that's currently being spoken in the High Court, even as we track all those minute details. We have Malvika Avinash, BJP spokesperson, joining us on the phone line. Malvika, your government, the Karnataka government's decision and your vision of and your definition of uniformity inside classrooms is what is more or less being upheld by the Karnataka High Court, saying that CDC guidelines, which says no religious symbols allowed inside classrooms, including saffron shawls, hijab, or anything else for that matter, will not be allowed. It's plain and simple uniformity that's prescribed by that institution only. How do you look at this verdict?
No, I welcome the verdict, and it's a vindication of the government's position right from the beginning, that girls will be allowed to wear hijab right up until the campus, but not inside the classroom. Because once they enter the classroom, it's important that uniformity is more important than religious identity. And the court has held just that. One, that it's not an essential part of Islam. Two, that it is part of the reasonable restrictions that are permitted under the Constitution. Three, that the government was indeed empowered to issue that impugned order that was questioned by the petitioners. And four, all of the writs were rejected and hence disposed by the Honorable High Court of Karnataka. We are indeed thankful to the High Court for having vindicated our position. Now we urge all the students to please go back to class, to please write their exams and continue with their education and not get caught in this, politics of religion, which they have been essentially instigated by some vested interests.
You know, Malvika, like you rightly said, this has become a vicious political debate, and this is expected to rage on. It has come as a massive setback to thousands of those students. In fact, it started with 6 students, 6 girls pushing for hijab, and they seem to have got support from many students across Karnataka wearing the hijab, wanting to wear the hijab even inside classrooms. It was not like the practice wasn't allowed in the past. Many institutions allowed for it. But now with this verdict, it appears that those institutions that even allowed for hijab inside classrooms might hesitate. Any word of advice or any direction that you would want to give to those institutions that maybe earlier allowed for it?
I don't know. I think if they're indeed allowed, then perhaps status quo should be maintained. However, if they reconsider based on this decision, then it's entirely the right of the College Development Council. What I'd like to tell you as a woman to woman, is if you ask me, I am at the other end of the spectrum. Uniform should be gender neutral. Uniform should be the same for all. Why a separate uniform for girls with a dupatta and all that? Why trousers and shirts for boys? Everyone should wear the same uniform. Uniform should be devoid of any kind of identity, religious also. If you ask me, it should be gender neutral. And I hope that's the future.
Well, we really hope that rules and regulations are followed. This is, of course, now the Karnataka High Court taking up the matter, deliberating extensively on whether hijab is an essential practice in Islam or not, because that's where the discussion and the debate boiled down to. And after much of those deliberations here, the Karnataka High Court really says that hijab is not an essential practice in Islam. This comes as a big blow to many of those students that pushed, saying that hijab is indeed an essential practice in Islam. Now for them to approach the Supreme Court, there needs to be a rework in their petition, their appeal and their stance as well, because here in the Karnataka High Court, they did not find hijab as an essential practice at all. And now while that said, it's more or less the students who are bearing the brunt, who are hoping to attend classes, on one hand, are torn apart between college and school managements and their families. Families insisting that they wear the hijab and go to classes, and college insisting that they remove it while they enter classes. Let me quickly cut across to the Chief Minister, Basuraj Bommai, speaking on the same.
ಈಗ ತಾನೇ ಮಾಧ್ಯಮಗಳಿಂದ ಗೌರವಾನ್ವಿತ ಉಚ್ಚ ನ್ಯಾಯಾಲಯ ಸಮವಸ್ತ್ರದ ಕೇಸ್ನಲ್ಲಿ ತನ್ನ ತೀರ್ಪನ್ನು ನೀಡುತ್ತಿರುವುದರ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಮಾಹಿತಿ ಬಂದಿದೆ.
I've heard about the verdict that's just come out in High Court through the media.
ಮತ್ತು ಹಿಜಾಬ್ ಒಂದು ಎಸೆನ್ಷಿಯಲ್ ರಿಲಿಜಿಯಸ್ ಪ್ರಾಕ್ಟೀಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲ ಅನ್ನೋದನ್ನ
We heard that the court has said hijab is not an essential Islamic practice.
ಇದು ನಮ್ಮ ಮಕ್ಕಳ ಭವಿಷ್ಯದ ಪ್ರಶ್ನೆ ಇದೆ. ನಮ್ಮ ಮಕ್ಕಳ
This is a matter of our children's future.
ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಗೆ ವಿದ್ಯೆಗಿಂತ ಮುಖ್ಯ ಮತ್ತೊಂದು ಯಾವುದೂ ಇಲ್ಲ.
There is nothing more important than education for children.
ಹೀಗಾಗಿ ತ್ರಿಸದಸ್ಯ ಪೀಠ ಉಚ್ಚ ನ್ಯಾಯಾಲಯದ ಏನು ತೀರ್ಪು ಕೊಟ್ಟಿದೆ ನಾವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಕೂಡ ಇದನ್ನ ಪಾಲಿಸಬೇಕು.
We must abide by what the court's order says.
ನಾವು ಅನುಷ್ಠಾನಗೊಳಿಸುವಂತಹ ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಕೂಡ ಸಹಕಾರವನ್ನು ಮಾಡಬೇಕು.
Everyone must cooperate and ensure that peace and harmony is maintained.
ಶಾಂತಿ ಸುವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆ ಇರುವಂತದ್ದು ಬಹಳ
There must be peace and education must continue.
ಸಮಸ್ತ ಎಲ್ಲ ಜನತೆಗೆ, ಎಲ್ಲ ಸಮುದಾಯದ ನಾಯಕರಿಗೆ, ಎಲ್ಲ ಪಾಲಕರಿಗೆ, ಶಿಕ್ಷಕರಿಗೆ,
All the
ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿಗಳಿಗೆ
educationalists, politicians,
ಕಳಕಳಿ ವಿನಂತಿಯನ್ನು ಮಾಡ್ತೇನೆ.
authorities, I appeal to
ಈ
them
ಒಂದು ತೀರ್ಪಿನ ನಂತರ ನಾವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಒಪ್ಪಿಕೊಂಡು
that we must accept the High Court's verdict
ಕಾಪಾಡಿ ಏನು ತೀರ್ಪಿನ ಅನ್ವಯ ಬರುವಂತಹ ದಿನಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಎಜುಕೇಶನ್ ಅನ್ನ, ನಮ್ಮ ಶಿಕ್ಷಣವನ್ನ ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಗೆ ಕೊಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಕೂಡ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಸಹಕಾರ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು
and
ಅನ್ನುವಂತ
that our focus should be to ensure education is delivered to all students.
Last time we saw people boycotting. Would you request
And
them to
nothing
not
else
boycott, sir?
must interfere
and follow
with
the
that.
High Court order? Would you request them?
ಎಲ್ಲ ವಿದ್ಯಾರ್ಥಿಗಳಿಗೆ ವಿಶೇಷವಾಗಿ ಹೈಕೋರ್ಟ್ ಆಜ್ಞೆಯನ್ನು ಪಾಲನೆ ಮಾಡಿ. ನಿಮ್ಮ ಶಿಕ್ಷಣ ಬಹಳ ಮುಖ್ಯ. ಯಾವುದೇ ರೀತಿಯ
I again appeal for all institutions
ಪ್ರಿಪರೇಟರಿ ಎಕ್ಸಾಮ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಆದಂಗೆ ಅದನ್ನ
follow the High Court's order as education is important.
ಯಾವುದನ್ನು ಕೂಡ ಮಾಡದೆ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಕೂಡ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್ಗೆ ಭಾಗವಹಿಸಬೇಕು, ಶಿಕ್ಷಣದಲ್ಲಿ
And
ಭಾಗವಹಿಸಬೇಕು.
I appeal to all those students as well that they must attend classes.
ಭವಿಷ್ಯಗಳನ್ನ
This is your educational future that is at stake.
ನಾವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಕೂಡ ಚಿಂತನೆಯನ್ನ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಮತ್ತು ಆ ತರ
Do not be influenced. Please come and attend classes. Education is the most important.
ಪ್ರಿಪರೇಟರಿ ಅದೇನು ಮೇಜರ್.
Sir, one line in English also then. It's a national news, sir.
ಸಂಘಟನೆಗಳಿಗೆ ಏನು ಎಚ್ಚರಿಕೆ ಕೊಡ್ತೀರಾ ಅಂತ? ಕೆಲವು ಸಂಘಟನೆಗಳು ಕೂಡ
ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ಕಾನೂನು ಸುವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆಗೆ ನಾವು ನಿಯೋಜನೆಯನ್ನು ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೇವೆ. ಹೈಕೋರ್ಟ್ ತೀರ್ಪು ಬಂದ ಮೇಲೆ ಒಂದು ಮಟ್ಟಕ್ಕೆ ಇತ್ಯರ್ಥ ಆಗಿದ್ದರಿಂದ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಒಪ್ಕೋಬೇಕು. ಇದರ ವ್ಯತಿರಿಕ್ತವಾಗಿ ಕಾನೂನು ಸುವ್ಯವಸ್ಥೆ ಕೈಗೆ ತೆಗೆದುಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಗೃಹ ಇಲಾಖೆ ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ತಕ್ಕವಾದಂಥ ಕಠಿಣವಾದಂಥ ಕ್ರಮವನ್ನು ನಾವು ತೆಗೆದುಕೊಳ್ಳಿ.
Sir, in English also, sir, if you could just brief shortly, sir. In English also on the hijab that has been, interim ban has been upheld.
Yes, the Honorable three-bench High Court has given a verdict that the uniform order by the government has been upheld, and they have mentioned that hijab is not an essential practice of religion. Therefore, I request everybody in the society, in the parents, teachers, students, and those who are concerned about education to whatever the High Court has said, we have to see that it is implemented and peace and order is maintained. And I request all of them to maintain peace and order for the future education of our children, which is very important. For a children, education is most important than anything else. And High Court has settled the matter now. Hence, I request everybody to follow the High Court order and maintain peace and order and allow the children to do their education as usual.
Sir, the next 2 weeks will be very crucial for your government because anti-social elements might be ignited.
ಸಮುದಾಯ ನಾಯಕರಿಗೆ ಮನವಿ ಮಾಡ್ತೇನೆ. ಈಗಾಗಲೇ ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಬಹಳಷ್ಟು ಚರ್ಚೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಆಗಿದೆ. ಅದಾದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಹೈಕೋರ್ಟಲ್ಲೂ ಕೂಡ ವಾದ ವಿವಾದ ಎಲ್ಲಗಳು ಆಗಿ ಈಗ ಒಂದು ಹಂತಕ್ಕೆ ಬಂದಿದೆ. ಈಗ ಒಂದು ತೀರ್ಪು ಬಂದಿದೆ. ಇದನ್ನೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಒಪ್ಪಿಕೊಂಡ್ರೆ ಸಮಾಜಕ್ಕೆ ಮತ್ತು ವಿಶೇಷವಾಗಿ ಎಲ್ಲ ಮಕ್ಕಳಿಗೆ ಒಂದು ಒಳ್ಳೇದಾಗ್ತದೆ. ಮಕ್ಕಳ ಹಿತದೃಷ್ಟಿಯಿಂದ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಕೂಡ ಒಪ್ಕೋಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಎಲ್ಲ ಸಮುದಾಯದವರು
ಅಪೀಲ್ಗೆ ಹೋಗ್ಬೋದು
ಹೂವಾಗೆ ಹಿಂದಿಂದಕ್ಕೆಲ್ಲ ನಾನು ಹೇಳಲ್ಲ. ಇವತ್ತು ಹೈಕೋರ್ಟ್ ಜಡ್ಜ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಬಂದ ಮೇಲೆ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಪಾಲನೆ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅನ್ನುವಂತ ವಿನಂತಿ ನಾನು ಮಾಡ್ತೀನಿ.
Of escalation there will be. I will not be able to comment if petitioners will reach a higher court, but for now we must abide by what the Karnataka High Court has said. Hijab is not an essential practice in Islam. This is the words of Basuraj Bommai, the Chief Minister of Karnataka. Basuraj Bommai has been from the start trying to ensure law and order situation is maintained. In fact, a fresh order was given out by the Karnataka government itself post the situation escalating with violent turns, protests that came in. Let me cut across to BC Nagesh, the Education Minister, speaking on the same.
ಯೂನಿಫಾರ್ಮ್ ಅನ್ನುವಂಥದ್ದು ಬಟ್ಟೆಗಷ್ಟೇ ಸೀಮಿತ, ಬಟ್ಟೆಗೆ ಮತ್ತೊಂದು ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ಸೀಮಿತ ಹೊರತು ಇವತ್ತವರೆಗೂ ನಾವು ಯಾರನ್ನೇ ಅಲಂಕಾರಿಕ ವಸ್ತುಗಳಿನ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ನಾವು ಚರ್ಚೆ ಮಾಡುತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. ಎಲ್ಲಾ ಹಿಂದೂ ಹೆಣ್ಮಕ್ಳುಗಳು ಕುಂಕುಮ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡ್ ಬರ್ತಿದ್ರು ಅಂತ ಏನಿಲ್ಲ, ಹೂ ಮುಟ್ಕೊಂಡ್ ಬರ್ತಿದ್ರು ಅಂತ ಏನಿಲ್ಲ. ಬೇರೆ ಧರ್ಮದ ಮಕ್ಕಳುಗಳಿಗೂ ನೀವು ಹೂ ಮುಟ್ಕೊಂಡೇ ಬರಬೇಕು, ಕುಂಕುಮ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡೇ ಬರಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ನಾವು ಯಾವತ್ತೂ ಎಲ್ಲೂ ಯಾವುದೇ ಸರ್ಕಾರಗಳು ಹೇಳಿಲ್ಲ. ಮತ್ತು ಇದು ಸಹಿತ ಇವತ್ತಿನ ಕೋರ್ಟಿನ ಮ್ಯಾಟ್ರ್ ಮುಂದೆ ಇಲ್ಲ. ಇದು ಹಿಜಾಬ್ ಹಾಕು ಅನ್ನೋಂಥ ಒಂದೇ ವಿಷಯದಲ್ಲೇ ಬಂದಿದ್ದೇ ಬಿಟ್ರೆ ಕೋರ್ಟ್ ಮುಂದೆ ಈ ತರದ್ದು ಯಾವುದೋ ವಿಷಯ ಇತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ. ಆ ಕಾರಣ ಕೋರ್ಟ್ ಕ್ಲಾರಿಫೈ ಮಾಡಿದೆ, 3 ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ಅನ್ನ ಇಟ್ಕೊಂಡಿತ್ತು, 3 ಕ್ಲಾರಿಫೈ ಮಾಡಿದೆ. ಅದರಿಂದ ಈ ಕನ್ಫ್ಯೂಷನ್ ಯಾರಿಗೂ ಇಲ್ಲ, ನಾವಾಗೆ ಹುಟ್ಟಾಕೋದು.
Joining with me right now is the Karnataka Education Minister, Mr. BC Nagesh.
ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಕೊಡಬೇಕು ಸರ್, ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಯಾರಿಗೂ ಕೊಡಬೇಡಿ. ನಿಮ್ ಡಿಸೈಡ್ ಅದು, ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಎಲ್ಲ ಕ್ಲಿಯರ್ ಆಗಿ ಹೇಳಿದಿರಾ. ಒಂದು ನೀವು ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ಕೊಡಬೇಕು ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ.
All right, there you have it. Karnataka government very clearly saying that this has been the stance right from the start. They have not been against hijab as a practice at all. But inside education institutions, inside classrooms, there needs to be a kind of uniformity that must be maintained. BC Nagesh there speaking to India Today.
What do you have to say?
That is what the government was saying. Government had clearly clarified in its circular that every student who ever come to the college should follow the uniform prescribed by the SDMC committee. Uniform is there only to see that all students should feel that they are equal. They are all the respected citizens of this country. We are all one. So no inferiority complex or superiority complex should arise among the young minds of the country. So we had told the student to follow the same, and they were following. Only in December we found, particularly by 6 students of Udupi, such confusions had been created. They were saying that we wanted to follow our religious practices. We tried to convince them. They were unable to be convinced and they went to the court. Actually, government did not go for the court. You should also know that. They prayed before the court that hijab is their religious practice and their constitutional right. And court has clarified it. It is not the essential religious practice. Second, according to the constitution, it is a restricted right, and both has been clarified, and there will be no confusion in future for any student. And again, through you, I request the student to follow the judgment of the court and come to the college and continue the education.
So before I let you go, one question that I want to ask. So, we saw that while this whole issue was playing out, there was a lot of law and order issue in Karnataka as well. And also there were a lot of parents who come out and said, that if hijab is not allowed, they'll not send their students to schools or colleges. So after this verdict, any appeal that you want to personally make to these parents as well so that, probably the atmosphere betters?
First thing, I deny that there was law and order problem. There was no law and order problem in the Karnataka. There was fair incident which had taken place. That you cannot say that whole Karnataka we had a problem. 1 or 2 places there was a problem. And as you know that initially more than 1,000 plus students were saying that religious is more important than school. But naturally it came down to 200 and plus. Means even they came to know that really education is more important than religious practices and we should follow the law of the land, and they followed it and they were going to continue the same thing. Whoever has not attended the class for last 1 month, I request them to attend the class and continue, and they should be in the mainstream of the society. They should not be separated.
Sir, any action will be taken against the students who continued in the protest?
This nation has given right for every citizen. It is again their right whether to come to the college or not. I cannot impinge their rights.
Thank you, sir.
So that was the Karnataka Education Minister who said he can't impinge the right, but he also was thankful that the High Court has upheld the decision what the Karnataka government also had, that it's not an important practice of religion and uniform should be followed.
All right, there you have it. Karnataka Education Minister saying that the stance of the Karnataka government was never to restrict hijab anywhere except for inside classrooms, because they expect students to maintain uniformity and no kind of discrimination, no kind of difference between students inside classrooms. And that should be followed even post the High Court's verdict. It must be respected. Shaukat Ali joining us, Muslim women's rights activist, to give us a perspective on the Karnataka High Court's verdict. Shaukat, this is almost a big blow to many of those women who insist that they must be allowed to wear hijab inside classrooms as well. This might have repercussions. We're hoping that it won't, but it is expected to have a kind of fallout with maybe many of these Muslim women now seeking other legal opportunities or legal intervention to really push their opinion on hijab. How do you look at this coming as a setback for those girls who are seeking education and want to wear hijab at the same time?
I think the first thing is, as I would like to say, is that we have to obey the idea of the order of the Honorable Court, whatever order they have given, and what they are talking about is the uniformity. You see, there is this entire, I think, kind of a mindset that is coming in that hijab is going to be, it's a blanket ban on hijab. That is not so. It is, you have to, when you enter a school premise, you have to maintain uniformity. There should be no discrimination, and you're there for education. And no child, no girl should step out of this. All the girls who are in the school must continue their education, because Islam is teaching them. And the Holy Quran is saying that there are 805 verses to do with ilm and its derivatives in the Quran. And they have to be followed. So there is knowledge and ilm before anything else. So they can wear whatever they want outside, but once they enter the classroom, then there have to be uniformity, there have to be no discrimination. All of them are to study together. You are there to study, and please continue your education.
Zeenat, many of these students, as per the petitioners, I'm sounding here what the petitioners have said in their petition, is how is hijab intervening with our education? How is it really causing a situation of, trying to discriminate, or how is it really instigating public order? What is anyone's problem if we wear that dupatta, what we wear on the chest, also on the head? How is it intervening with our education?
You see, the whole point is that it may not do anything. It may not interfere in anything, but a uniformity is a uniformity without discrimination. Because somebody else will say that, I want to wear a saffron robe now. How does it interfere? And you see, the entire, college and school atmospheres get into a particular kind of a mindset. So whatever the court has said, it has said after due thought. There is a Muslim judge there also. And all of them have been very, very, I think, impartial in understanding that, and given the judgment after due consideration. They've taken a long time. They have looked into matters, they have studied matters, and then they have given the judgment. And I think it is for the betterment of the students that you're all together, you're all one, you're in uniform, you're not discriminated. Outside the class, you can dress as you please. I mean, outside the school, once you're out, you go to your house or you go shopping or whatever you may do.
Right.
You can dress as you please, because the Constitution of India gives you the right, every woman the right to dress the way she pleases, even if she wants to wear a ghungat, she's welcome. So the whole point is that you see this, but what the law says within a school premise, I think I think it is a law that all of us went to school. We went to convent schools, and none of us ever thought of why didn't we cover our head or why don't we do this? We just went over there and we studied. We went there
and speaking of convent schools, a large number of Muslim girls in Karnataka specifically, that's the city I'm from, Bangalore myself, I studied in a convent school myself. Convent schools very strictly disallowed hijab inside educational institutions, inside their schools and colleges. And at that place, we seldom saw any kind of revolt or resistance. People followed the set guidelines set by those convent schools and institutions. Then why kick up a ruckus at schools and colleges otherwise in different parts of Karnataka which had CDC guidelines? So several questions being raised, but this is not all now come down to a matter of choice. These, as per the petitioners, they're saying that this is our choice. This is a choice to profess our religion, and we must be allowed to do it even if it means inside classrooms. Now this Karnataka High Court's verdict, Zenith, will push many more schools that earlier allowed hijab inside classrooms now to disallow it. Would you give out a word of advice to those Muslim families who insist that without the hijab they will not send their girls to schools?
I think, you see, your question is so widespread that I think, this kind of uniformity and non-discrimination and, religion neutral. We are getting very hyper where these matters are concerned. We have to be much more sober and religion neutral. We are there to study our sciences, our mathematics, our languages, or, our history and our geography, whatever we need to study. We have to concentrate on that to get our degrees and to move on, to get further and to get stronger and to, to practice to help the country to come up.
Zenith, stay with us. We have reactions coming in from lawyers right after the Karnataka High Court's